Are we back?
We are back.
Any reflections on this morning's talk when you were out wandering around like civilians?
It really doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. I would think that Los Angeles conveys that pretty effectively.
Yeah, if it matters, you can't stay here.
I like that this is the only wakefulness there is. Doesn't get any better
Or worse.
or worse.
Qualifying it the whole human game consists of qualifying things in partial terms: wakefulness versus non-wakefulness, this versus that. This is not qualified. It has no versus. This is just simply this, and it's just wakeful as it is. It's just unwakeful as it is. It's not meaningful to address it in those kinds of terms. It's not meaningful to address it in any kinds of terms. It's exactly itself. And that's why it's so universal. That's why it's so absolutely incorporated. All qualities are just erroneous approximations of it. And they aren't there are no opposites. There are no contraries. There's just endless variety within this. So, delusion and realization, wakefulness and non-wakefulness, clarity and confusion are all just modes of this. They aren't actually opposites. They aren't actually polarities. There are no actual polarities. There's just this, whose nature is to portray itself with infinite degrees of differentiation, none of which are actually different. I mean, another aspect of this is that all conditions are made of the same thing. Wakefulness and whatever the opposite of wakefulness is are made of exactly the same thing. Tea and glass are made of the same thing. They're made of this presence. They're made of this actuality. That's literally the substance of them. They present as if they were very different. They present as if they were very different textures, very different, qualities. But that's the nature of this. It presents as infinitely differentiated qualitatively. But all these qualities are actually the same thing. It's like in a dream. In a dream, you can dream of anything, but they're all just made of dream. There's no multiple substances available in a dream to make things out of. All there is dreaming, and everything whatsoever is made from that. And likewise, with this situation right here, everything is made from, we call it wakefulness. Everything is made from experiencing. And it presents as if it was differentiated. It presents as if it was different qualities and different substances and different energies, but it isn't actually. Everything is this thing.
Consciousness and unconsciousness.
Yeah, you can't find anything. You can't actually find anything whatsoever. You can't find consciousness. You can't find unconsciousness. They're claims.
Claims.
Yeah. You can't. Try to find consciousness. It's self-evident that there is consciousness, right? You could say, because there seems to be consciousness of experience. But all of that circumlocution, consciousness of experience, is that there's a consciousness here and an experience there, and somehow in some relationship. You can't actually find consciousness. Try and find some consciousness that's separate from something else, or differentiable from something else. Try and find some, experience that's differentiable from something else. You can't. These things are just empty assertions. Everything collapses to this. If there's a consciousness, this is it. If there's experience, this is it. If there's objects, this is it. If there's a world, this is it. You know, if there's matter, this is it. You know, all of these qualities are just empty claims about this actuality, none of which can be found, none of which can be isolated. You can't actually find it. Try and find consciousness. You know, you can't find it.
So besides Mad Magazine, What Me Worry, you know, Calvin and Hobbes with Does It Matter? So nothing matters.
And more importantly, and more primarily, it doesn't matter if it matters.
Yeah.
It's not like it doesn't matter, like it needs to not matter, and you need to somehow mattering is suddenly the enemy. Nothing matters, even if it matters, doesn't matter. I mean, look at it. Just look at it. Actuality is okay. What is, any condition that is okay, and any condition that is not isolatable or findable or ultimately determinable in terms of what it is. I mean, mattering. Nothing matters. Okay, so that's a statement. Nothing matters. Try and find mattering. What would mattering look like? Where would you find it? You know, it's all words, all ideas are just empty assertions that are applied to or imputed to apply to this actuality, and you can't isolate them. You can't find them. You can't find anything. Nothing can be found. Nothing can be precisely determined. Can be defined. Can be, you know.
But the effort to do that, that's suffering.
The effort to do which?
The effort to make things matter, to define them.
Well, the effort to do so can be an interesting exploration if you go the distance and discover they're undefinable. The assumption that they're definable without going to that effort is what causes suffering. When you assume things are definable, when you assume that there is a good and a bad, there is a mattering and a not mattering, there is a, you know, success and a failure. So you assume there is success because success is definable. Success exists because it is success, and success is success because this is it. All of that whole chain of argument validates these conditions as being actual and therefore mattering. And they don't matter because they aren't what they seem to be. They aren't findable. They don't actually exist. They're sloppy claims of something that in its actuality completely transcends actually being that. Try and find what would success look like? You know, you define it into existence in terms of other terms, and then you have to look for each of those other terms and find out exactly what they are. And you can't find what anything is. So I mean, I say you can't find what anything is, it sounds very technical and abstract. It sounds like you're sort of scientists in the laboratory analyzing things. And that's true on that level too. But, you know, just on a very direct, immediate experiential level, you sitting in your experience, try and find exactly what anything is. You know, try and find what success, you know, what success is. Try and find what mattering is. Try and find any of these conditions, and they exist, they persist, they seem most stable and most actual in their vagueness. When you get precise and look at what's actually there, you can't find anything like that. And then you get more precise and look even closer what's actually there, and you don't find anything at all. This doesn't go away, but you can't find it. I mean, it's the weirdest. It's the weirdest thing there is.
What's even worse, think about comparison, and what that has done to everything.
Well, it's the same. Well, comparison is just an implication of definability.
Right.
It's all. I mean, there's a whole. That's the whole can of worms. That's the whole samsara. That's the whole suffering in a nutshell. There's a this and there's a that, and this is better or worse than that, and so therefore I have to try and get to this and get away from that. You know, and you know, it's the rats so often running in the cage. You know. I mean, we're all familiar with this. This is the normal human mode, and it's based on an entire and complete and utter fallacy. And again, not just a fallacy as an abstraction, not just a fallacy in logical terms, but experientially it's a fallacy. No such actualities can be found. No such critters can be found. It's like being terrified of snipes. You know, I'm just so afraid that the snipes are going to come through and eat me up in my sleep. You know, you can't find snipes; they don't exist. So why be scared of them? You know, you can't find failure; it doesn't exist. So why be scared of it? You can't find success; it doesn't exist. So why be oriented towards it? But all of this trying to negate definability is unimportant. More simply, this is actual. This is here. This is it. This is you. This is real. I mean, all these kinds of simple statements, just focusing on this actuality right here, right now, self-evident. I mean, that's a supreme positivity. It's a positivity that encompasses everything, encompasses all reality. And it's right here, right now, always. And so check it out. And of course, you don't need to, it's not like you even need to notice that that's the case. It just, yeah, this is right here, sure, of course. And now what? Anything. What then? Whatever. And the tendency of mind and emotion and fixation to spin off and lock onto this and that and the other doesn't matter. It's just another way that can seem to show up. This can appear like that. Like everything, it just seems to be there. It seems to come. It seems to go, and then something else seems to be there, and all this endless cascade of seemings, absolute dynamism. They don't matter. Nothing. It's always just this here, with this endless cascade of seemings. They are never actually anything. They're just these sort of more or less vague or not so vague seemings. No matter how intricate they are, no matter how seductive or involving they are, it just doesn't matter. So you get seduced into, getting obsessive or upset or all worked up about something. Who cares? I mean, what difference does it make? It blows over, and I mean, here you are, and here you are, and here you are. There's no specialness. There's no preferred state. There's no condition which is superior to some other condition.
We have such a hunger for meaning.
Sure. I mean, it's very typical. But meaning is imagined into existence. The actual meaning is actuality, which is profoundly meaningful, but it's not a meaningfulness that you can pin down. I mean, experience is incredibly luscious and just pregnant with astounding qualities and beauties and amazingnesses, right? And here it is. This is as meaningful, but there's no meaning that can be achieved or that isn't, or that needs to be, you know, stated or solidified or stabilized or stated or anything like that. The meaningfulness is the meaning of this, the meaning of actuality, the meaning of qualities, the meaning of life force.
Fullness itself.
Yeah, and it is, by its very nature, the fullness. It is fullness. There is no other fullness. There's no otherness whatsoever. And this is never not full. You know, you could say the field of experience is always full of qualities.
And I noticed that in this way of experiencing, there are no separate dimensions.
No.
Even being nested.
Yeah.
There's no
There's-
borderlines.
Yeah, there's infinite dimensions, but there's no separation, and there's no definition between one and another. There's just infinite difference, infinite degrees of difference that seem to be present in various ways, but none of them are actually isolatable, and there's no hierarchy. There's no inside or outside or above or below or better or worse or clearer or less clear. It's all just endless seemings of differentness as this presenting.
So there's no higher.
No higher, no lower.
No higher and lower.
Yeah, absolutely. No need for preciousness or poise or not. The implication is relax.
So then if you use the phrase this morning, it's weird to the power of weird. In a way, it's also radical to the power of radical.
Oh, absolutely.
In that the fact that there are people lopping off people's heads and massacring villages is just a seeming like going down to have lunch at a restaurant.
Sure.
It's from that perspective, it's just, there it is.
Sure. It's like saying you can dream of anything and it's just a dream.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't become more or less of a dream by what you dream of. You know, the most horrific, grotesque, gore-filled nightmare is actually, in terms of a dreaming, no different whatsoever than the most exquisitely beautiful, aesthetically pleasing, fulfilling vision of perfection and achievement. You know, they're just different flavors of dreaming. And dreaming is no more or less dreaming by what it shows up as. You know, and it gets, it's infinitely nuanced. It's not simplistic. So yeah, by all means, if you'd rather not be in a world where people are chopping each other's heads off and you have the wherewithal to do something about it, by all means do something. Because that doesn't matter if you do that. It's not like it doesn't matter, so let them do it. That's it doesn't matter, so nothing that doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter if you try and stop them. It doesn't matter if criminals are breaking the law. It doesn't matter if policemen try and stop them. It doesn't matter if laws are passed to enable the policemen. It doesn't matter if those laws are unjust and so people activate to try to improve the laws. It doesn't matter if all of the infinite ramifications and complications that can seem to follow by being with these various conditions in various ways all remain in the root condition of not important. It's not like there's some condition of event that's not important and then that has to be held as not important. It's not important whether it's not important that it be taken not as being not important. Even if it seems important, that's not important. If it seems to matter, that's not important. So in short, any state that actuality can seem to be in doesn't matter, including having it matter, having it be very important, having it, But see, that's like the fine print. It's like a loophole. If you know that, then you don't need to be caught up in mattering as if it's some perpetuating, cause that you're caught up in that you can't jettison. Whether you're caught up or not, you can say, well, yeah, I really want to do this. Oh, screw it, I'm going to do something else. Because you have freedom when you see it doesn't really matter. It's not actually important. Unless it happens to be important to you, and that's not important, and that's cool too. So it's, it really, it's very subtle. I mean, if you do the math, it's very subtle because it's self-reflexive. It applies to itself. Not mattering applies to not mattering. It doesn't matter that it doesn't matter. So this isn't really about the human dimension or ethics or morality at all. It's really, it undercuts that it actually explains the way things are. Everything is exactly the way it is, and that's okay because that is an expression of reality. And that's the powerful fact. Not that things are this way and they should be that way. And people can think that too, and that's actual, and that's also an expression of actuality, which is the powerful fact. So, in other words, everything is just exactly the way it is, and all of that consists of and is the expression of absolute transcendental actuality. Actuality is very strange because it's absolutely and utterly transcendental, and yet it's absolutely and utterly concrete and actual. We're used to thinking of those two as sort of polar opposites. Transcendental is sort of woo, somewhere, way up there, and angels dancing on pinheads or something. Transcendental is this. Solidity is transcendental. Stability is transcendental. Event is transcendental. Sensory experience is transcendental. The actuality itself is transcendental in the sense that it's infinite. It's literally infinite, not infinite as an abstraction. Infinite is just another way of putting an unresolvability. It's like a fractal, The fractal looks as if it has a shape if you don't look too closely, but you start looking closely and you start finding more and more and more shape. The more you look, and the shape is all different from all the other shapes you find, the closer you look, and you look closer and you find even more shape, and you go into it forever, and you keep finding continual difference, and it never resolves into, okay, that's the shape it is. That's the unresolvability is infinity, and every aspect, explicitly, every concrete aspect of experiencing is like that. So this is not at all an abstraction. It's extremely concrete, extremely specific and actual, experiential. There is nothing but experience. Experiential is the canon of actuality. It's the only touchstone of actuality at all. The only thing that can be found is experience.
I still think of it as the nothing from which things come, but it's a separation.
You can think of it that way. It doesn't hurt, it's just not accurate. You can't find an actual nothing, and you can't find an actual something,
Oh, okay, okay.
and you can't find a coming from. So here's things, right? This is things, but you can't find here's the things and they come from there
Right.
or from that. There's no that they come from. There's the things, but the things are unresolvable, so the things are also nothing. So things are nothing, and yet they're something. So something and nothing turn out to be synonyms. Things and non-things turns out to be synonyms. They're just different ways of looking at the same actuality, which is why it's transcendental. It transcends being pinned down. It transcends being able to be defined, being able to be gotten to the bottom of, gotten to the, the core of.
Or conceptualized.
Yeah, or conceptualized or modeled or anything like that. And so conceptualization is always approximation. And humans have to approximate, because if they were precise you wouldn't be able to find anything. You wouldn't be able to talk about anything. To have conditions that are differentiable, you have to settle for approximations, because no actually differentiable conditions can be found. Strangely. I mean, it's very strange that that's the case. But there you go.
Yeah, because words are limiters. Can't talk about everything. Can't talk about everything.
You can't talk about anything, really, as it actually is.
Yeah.
Because words have implication. When you talk about things, you talk about the implication of what, if I start talking about that chair, that implies that there is a chair, and that what this is somehow accurately or semi-accurately indicatable by some notion of chair or some definition of chair. And it's not that, but on the other hand, you can't find that it is that. So it evaporates into strangeness. It evaporates into undefinability without being eliminated. I mean, nothing is eliminated. Nothing is disproved. That's why I said, earlier I was sort of joking, and I said, it's as if every conspiracy theory you could imagine was all true at once. Nothing can be eliminated. You can't disprove chairs, but you can't find a chair. So where does that leave you? Well, you can't say where it leaves you. It doesn't leave you anywhere, but it doesn't leave you nowhere. It's just not like that. It's this. This actuality is like that. And you can't even get to the bottom of what that is like. It's exactly like it. Can't find it, because it's not like that. But here it is. So who has an issue with any of this? How does that sit with you?
Doesn't have to.
How can you tell if you have an issue with it? How can you tell if you don't have an issue with it? What's it feel like? Can you tell what it feels like?
Feels like shit if you try to understand it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the way you're describing it leaves no. I mean, it leaves no. Well, you'll disagree with this, but it leaves no access.
Okay. No, I don't disagree with that. I have no problem with that.
Um,
Well, how
but
you're saying
you're
the way I
saying
describe it? How would you describe it? I mean, you know, just looking at your experience right now. How do you describe
I would
it?
look for the things that aren't changing in it, which would be here-ness, clarity.
Can you find here-ness that's not changing? I mean, there's a sense that there's a here-ness that isn't changed, but can you actually find the here-ness that's not changing?
Well, if I can't experience it, I'm in trouble. I mean, I think I can experience it.
You can.
I think it's
How do you know that? How do you know that that's what you're experiencing?
I'm experiencing something.
Okay. You're experiencing something, all right. Or at least you're experiencing, whether or
I'm
not it's something.
experiencing, yeah.
Okay.
So the lights are on.
But is there a here-ness? Can you find the here-ness? I mean,
Well, you can't
it's
get that.
intuitively obvious that there's a here-ness. When you go looking for here,
Well, there's
what
no
do you
boundary
find?
to it. There's no boundary.
so in what sense is it here?
Well, in terms of more of immediacy, I guess.
Okay, so you can say there is immediacy, but what is immediacy? When you're looking for
There's
immediacy,
no
can you
boundary on
find
that
it?
either. But that just because I can't find anything doesn't mean there's
No, it's not being negated.
Yeah.
It just means that it's transcendental. It's not that you can't, holding it as being here-ness or immediacy may be a little heavy-handed. It's not nothing. It's not being negated. But in the absence of resolvability, it's kind of,
Oh yeah.
it's a transcendental here-ness, a transcendental actuality.
I mean, I guess logically, I mean, well, that the only access is that there is no access because there's nothing to access. It's already here.
Sure.
It's already a done deal.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that. Basically, leaves nothing to talk about.
Fine.
And it also leaves nothing to share. It leaves nothing to. I don't know. It's not sitting quite well. I'm not sure what's the problem with it.
What's not sitting well? What's
Well,
not
as I said, there's
then?
not. I mean, okay, so there's just all there is, and I'll say this is not it either, but it's all there is then is just floating in nowhere.
What makes it nowhere?
Um,
But I won't argue too hard with the floating. That's fine. But there's a floating.
yeah.
Where makes it nowhere?
Well.
I mean, nowhere implies that there is a somewhere that is not.
Well, it's just like
If this is the somewhere, it's a floating in somewhere. This is the only where, so
Right.
it's a floating in where, or in here, you might say. Take the W away. It's only a negative with reference to some positive, and any positive that is not is imaginary, which paradoxically it also is.
I mean, it's so nonsensical to me. It's like saying
It is nonsense.
It's like
completely
saying
nonsensical.
nothing is everything, or
Yeah, it's utterly nonsensical. Because sense cannot approach this. It transcends logic. It's not rational.
When you say sense cannot approach it, but certainly it is something that you sense.
No, I mean
there.
sense like logic.
Oh.
He said it's nonsense. He was meaning like it's gibberish. It doesn't make sense, but absolutely sense is sense.
Yeah,
Sense is
it
it.
can only be sensed, you cannot pinpoint what it is.
Right.
But when you hear the sound appears
Right.
in it.
Sure.
So that's how you sense from the sound, and in whatever appears in the vision, the object, whatever the color or whatever the object is appeared in it.
Right.
But this it, you cannot say what it is.
Right.
But is this, the best you can say is like a space, everything, all the sound, all the sensation appears. But if you're trying to separate, you cannot separate or abstract.
Right.
You can't do it.
Yeah.
But somehow I still feel like that I need to increase the sensibility of that, and also make it whatever is going to be unmovable like a mountain. You constantly feel it. But for me, it's like coming and go. Even though I know it is always here, it can't go anywhere, and it is everywhere. Because when the sound happened in the space, something, airplane or whatever the sound is, all happen in it. But there's no distance, even though logically you're thinking it's on the sky or in the street, whatever. But it's always there.
Yeah.
But just the sensitivity has not.
Yeah.
Really.
And that's like an art form. The motivation to increase sensitivity or to explore, to be with it more subtly at a finer, let's say at a finer level of fineness, it's like an art form. It's like wanting to be a good athlete, wanting to run better or something. It's fine. It's good. Good thing to want.
And also stabilize. Whatever, I don't know how to say that.
But when you're with it closer, you find the way in which it is already stabilized more precisely. Because the idea that it's not stabilized is a misunderstanding of it. It's not that you actually stabilize it, but you come to an understanding of the way it is unstable now is actually its stability. Its nature is complete instability, complete incoherence.
Yeah.
So it continually is dynamic and seems to come and go from itself without ever going anywhere.
There's no way it can go anywhere. It's always here and now.
But it's good to explore it, because when you explore it, you find this out more precisely for yourself. I mean, what I'm doing today is just sort of rubbing your noses in these characteristics that are apparent and can be readily apparent to you, and can be even more precisely readily apparent to you if you sort of play with this or do the math or really get into the fine points and but what about this? What about that? Or really, really try and prove it for yourself. Well, this said this and it makes sense and I kind of see it, but really like, well, okay, but what about really? I mean, just really go into it with intense application, and you that's doing the math, and like Helen says, you explore it more finely, and you discover more precisely the way it is, the way that it is. Not that you ever finally discover the way it is, the way that it is, but you discover the more precisely you discover, you go into it, the more totally you eradicate any erroneous way you thought it was.
Well, I would say that the way I've been approaching this all along has been to go more finely into it.
Sure.
More finely into experience, and just finding that this is sort of like somehow I mean, experientially, I go in and I go find stuff, but just to go in and say that things aren't findable from the get-go somehow makes experiencing less accessible rather than I'm already in it. I mean, it makes it feel like a closed door rather than an opening.
Okay.
For me.
Sure, that's okay. That can be something you can explore too. What would closeness be made of?
Yeah, no, I can't. For some reason, I can't follow that right
No,
now.
it's not important.
Yeah.
what I feel like is this confusion. When the confusion comes to more upfront, then I lost the clarity.
Yeah. No, see, that's an error though. The confusion is one of the major modes of this. This is incoherence and confusion are one of the absolute major textures of this actuality. And again, in a human mode, we're used to pairing clarity with a spiritual achievement, and confusion is sort of the enemy of the problem. And sort of from a beginner's point of view or a simplistic point of view, that's true. But when you get to a certain point, the opposite becomes true.
Like,
Where actually confusion becomes your best ally and the clarity becomes your enemy, because the clarity is still
It's
something you have an orientation to or an attachment to.
like the value of being disillusioned.
I'm not sure I follow that, but
Mhm.
perhaps.
Yeah.
Being disillusioned is more like confusion,
Right, sure.
so it's breaking illusion.
Yeah. No, for sure. I see that.
The thing is that I think experientially that when I'm confused, it's showing up in perfect clarity. And I don't think the clarity has an
Right.
opposite.
Absolutely. Clarity doesn't have an opposite.
Right. Okay.
Confusion doesn't have an opposite either, in that sense. I mean, confusion basically is a failure to resolve things
Mhm.
in the presence of some degree of attempt to resolve them or hold it as something. And those are all ever-present conditions or ever-present energies, you might say, actualities to various degrees. The mind is always trying to get a handle on things. It's always failing.
Yeah, but nothing shows up because of confusion. I mean, things show up because of clarity.
Well, clarity is just a word for things showing up. You can't
there you go.
can't find an actual clarity.
Correct.
Other than its clarity is kind of it's kind of like consciousness. It's a logical argument into existence because of the fact. The fact that things are experienced implies that there's a consciousness. But then when you go looking for consciousness, you don't find any such thing. The fact that nothing is impeded implies a clarity, but then you go looking for clarity and you don't find it, except in the fact that things show up.
It keeps showing up. Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
So clarity is just a euphemism for the miraculous fact that there's apparition.
Which is how everything collapses into radiance. I mean, it's into one thing.
Sure. Well, it is collapsed into radiance, but yeah.
It-
And confusion is just a word for the unresolvability of things and the fact that you cannot, not just ultimately, but you can't in any degree distinguish one condition from another condition. Everything is smeared. Everything is, it's infinitely differentiated, but essentially homogeneous at the same time in a way that is just mind-boggling, literally mind-boggling. I mean, the mind just can't go there. Which is, of course, the nature of confusion, and yet confusion, and from a human point of view, is held to be a problem because you're supposed to know something and you're confused if you don't know it. And yet, in actuality, the assertion that you're supposed to know something is a fallacy.
Yeah.
Because the something to know, the only actual something to know is that things are not knowable.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only where, I mean, awe is not possible without not knowing. I mean, that's maybe the opposite of confusion is awe. That, I mean.
No, for sure. Aw's a good, nice word. It's a nice notion. You know? I mean, this is awful for sure. It's awe-inspiring. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, this is it. I mean, this is the divine. This is heaven.
Yeah.
This is the divine realm. I mean, if that ain't awesome, you've got real high standards.
Well, but then I guess the point that I would make of that is that awe is because things are not knowable, and which reduces it to awe rather than reduces it to confusion.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a different. I mean,
I think that awe exists because things are not knowable, because knowing something is intuitively and actually felt to be a diminishment of it.
Yes.
The actuality in the unresolvability and the transcendence, it's literally infinite. It's literally inconceivably grand. Whereas if it was finite and knowable and definable,
Yeah.
it would be small. It would be limited.
Right.
You know, human conceptualization, human normalcy, human, frames of reference are heavy-handed diminishing. They're heavy-handed reductionism. They're heavy-handed
Yes.
making things smaller and limited and pathetic, which is why life feels so sucky when you're thinking that those perspectives are accurate. You think, oh my God, I'm this little pathetic being stuck in this horrible, pathetic situation, as opposed to seeing that's just not the case. All conditions and all situations and all components of situations are actually this astounding infinities, and that's awesome. That's inconceivably wonderful. It's inconceivably beautiful. It's inconceivably grand. Not least of all by contrast with how pathetic they seem to be from this diminished, minimizing human perspective.
Well, my point is that this awe is that, let's just say, in the stupid spiritual seeking sense is the nectar I'm looking for, when the actual thing is the nectar is here already. It's
Right.
a done deal. Yes, and I'm with you on that. I'm not with you on the confusion part.
It's okay. You don't need to be.
I mean, because it's
The
fine.
the confusion is an implication of what makes it awesome is also what makes it confusion. Because the fact that it's awesome doesn't reduce its tendency to diminish itself. It tries to diminish it. The mind that's generating these models is it.
Yeah.
Transcendentality is trying to get a handle on itself and see itself as small. It's trying to reduce itself
Right.
in stature
Right.
to get a handle on itself, and which is why all these mental models appear.
Yeah.
And we think of them as something we're doing. We're not doing that.
It's pretty fucking awesome itself.
Yeah, it is. That itself is a transcendental function. How can that happen? How can this be looking at itself, analyzing itself, generating these models?
Yeah.
I mean, it's inconceivable. And then it fails, and confusion is an implication of. I mean, the whole thing is all just aspects of this inconceivable, awesome transcendentality.
Yeah.
But confusion, in anything definable as confusion, which of course is not actually a confusion, because any actuality is not definable, but still in all, anything that's has any degree of qualitativeness as seeming as confusion is of course transcendental actuality, because there can be nothing else. There can be nothing. There's nothing else for anything to be made of. So delusion, confusion, frustration, non-realization is all aspects of transcendental actuality. And in seeing that, realization does not consist of the elimination of confusion. It does not consist of the elimination of mentality and modeling. It does not consist of the elimination of any of these qualities. It consists of seeing what they are, which reveals them as not a problem, because they don't matter, because they are this. They are this. Not theoretically, they are this. And so they don't matter. They're sacraments. This pathetic mind and this pathetic emotionality and this neurotic identification and this scarred personality are sacraments of the divine. Literally, not just argumentatively. They literally are that.
Is confusion a discomfort with the acceptance of total ignorance?
Well, confusion as it's usually meant by humans, I would say, is a discomfort with the fantasy that things are supposed to be resolvable. And when there's a failure to resolve them, that's seen as a failing, and so that's defined as a problem. So the confusion, i.e., non-definition, is present by contrast with the fantasized definition that's hoped to be present, feels like a failing. So it's defined as a problem. And then in that context of definition, this confusion is in the way. This confusion is a big problem. I'm screwed by this confusion because it's in the way of me getting my resolution, as opposed to being a revelation of unresolvability, which is in fact resolution. The true resolution is the discovery of unresolvability. That's what all this resolves to. This resolves to the condition of unresolvability. That is the answer. Is that there's no answer, and that is it. Not just in a lot in a sophistic, sophistry-ish,
Yes.
sophistic. So not just in some verbal sense, but literally. You know, the actual answer is that there is no answer, and that is the answer. That answer is findable. It's not just a vague assertion or a logical position. It's actually discoverable. Unresolvability is discoverable. It's not resolvable. You can't resolve that unresolvability actually is unresolvability, but it's discoverable. And in that discovery, it is a certainty, and that is the answer to what is this? I mean, the Buddhists say with emptiness. The Buddhists say emptiness is the prime condition.
Recently, I've been coming to a sense of more than just some, I don't know, intellectual sense about, I don't know where the saying is, the mind is the slayer of the real, let the mind slay the slayer. And I'm very fond of the Oxfording pictures, and the sixth one, I think, is the boy is like riding home on the ox. Maybe he's playing his flute. He's not even looking forward. He's just like the Tao was flying along. So it's and there are more pictures beyond that, but it's sort of like, okay, this mind, this that I was seeking, with my mind, it's I've been slaying the real all along, and now that I've now that I see the hopelessness of this quest, I find myself now being carried by the Tao. So.
But the mind is not the enemy. The mind is not the problem. The mind, the very nature of the mind is to generate unreality, but that's not a problem. That's an aspect of reality. One of the prime aspects of reality is generating degrees of unreality. Which, obviously is very subtle. I mean, what we're talking about here, I hate to use the word just because it's such a pathetic cliche, but what we're talking about here is the extreme of non-duality. That there is no opposition. There is no other. There is no contrary. Not as a simple unity, but as all of the contrary and otherness and differentiation that there is this, without being canceled or eliminated or simplistically just sort of, no, that's not really there. It is really there, but it's not it that's really there. It's this that's really there. They can look like that. They can present like that. They can seem to be doing that.
How about perspective? What's the transcendent experience of? I guess we have fixed perspective. So experiencing everything at the same time.
I don't follow you.
What is perspective?
Well, what is perspective?
We're always saying, oh, you don't have big enough perspective.
Sure. Okay. That's a very good question. In one sense, this is all about perspective. But it's not about a simple perspective. It's about an accurate perspective on what this is that incorporates all of its elements in the way that they actually are, which in this case is as aspects of this group condition that do not depart at all from this prime condition. And all of these conditions are all here, but they can be seen in different perspectives. And so they can be seen as, we can have a simplistic human perspective where all these things are problems. Gosh, the fact that people are uncivilized and we can't have peace is a real problem. The fact that we don't realize that divine transcendence is a real problem. The fact that I'm a neurotic, damaged personality is a real problem. And that's a perspective. Seeing all those conditions from a perspective in which that's a problem, internally defined that way, is a perspective. Realization just consists of seeing all those exact same elements. You're not changing anything. You're not adding any elements or taking any elements away. You're just seeing them in the perspective in which they actually are, which is as aspects of this inherent, utterly transcendental actuality. And then you discover, oh, so they're not a problem. And even if they seem like a problem, it's not a problem. So yeah, it's a good point. Perspective is really a potent way to play with this. Potent magic tool. Potent weapon in the magician's bag of tricks.
Not knowing is, I remember it's sort of a big thing for me that not knowing is actually, I know that I've read in Zen literature, it seems like the end of the path. That's actually, I remember it's like a big thing. That's the beginning. That you actually start from there, and then you can explore all things non-verbally beyond that. And I'm wondering if not knowing is the same thing as the first, in the three things in TheOpendoorway. The first thing is the cutting through. That's the cutting through.
In a way, it is. Not knowing is the beginning. It's the true beginning of the path, but not knowing is also the true end of the path. And this is touched on in some traditions of Zen too. There's beginner's mind, which is the mind that doesn't know anything, and then there's the whole path of spiritual application and practice and exploration. But the goal of all of that is beginner's mind. Mm-hmm. The goal of that is to realize not knowing. So of course it's very paradoxical. And this we experience this as well. Of course, we're all very familiar with it. When you were an infant, when you were a newborn, you were just in raw experience. You didn't know anything. I mean, you had absolute direct naked experience of everything, but it was not in the context of knowing anything or having a handle on anything or having any perspective. And then as you mature, we explore all these various perspectives and this, that, and the other. And it turns out the goal of the spiritual path is essentially to come back to that original not knowing, that original beginner's mind. And not knowing is a powerful tool in that exploration, and it is also the goal of that exploration, and is also the start of that exploration. So it's very interesting.
So they talk about Kensho as one word. So I mean, the stories, the frog jumps in the pond or whatever, and then the person saying, the leaves are green, the water's blue, whatever. But I mean, there's this sense, let's say, a sense experience, and then there's no. It's not defined. It's not. It's benign. It's sufficient unto itself, and so that. And there's this awe. There's this awe quality about it. Okay, we see this infant, in awe of the world, but is not partaking of it in the same way as somebody who's gone through a life of experiences. But would you say that sort of Kensho experience, kind of on a sustained basis, could be like an example of the enlightened condition? Just like everything is just like, splash of.
Except it's not so much a sustained basis as a discovery that there is never a departure from that. Mm-hmm. That all seeming departures from that do not actually depart from that.
Yeah.
So the true sustain doesn't come from sustaining some state or achieving some condition that is then stabilized, so much as discovering that everything intrinsically is that, and so therefore in absolute freedom and letting anything go any which way, it never departs from that.
A quiet wonder about it, maybe.
Maybe not so quiet, but
maybe
yeah.
not. punctuate.
You had something earlier on?
Well, I was gonna ask, like, when, in moments of, you say confusion, so like in moments of despair, like, oh, everything's awful and blah, 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 blah. There are times when I can, again, dig deep into it, as you have said before, really look into it, and then it kind of dissipates, and it seems like, okay, well, that is, or whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
And it seems like, okay, spark of reality, but then it doesn't evolve into more. It always just seems like, oh, okay, well, now there's a butterfly, or
Sure.
it doesn't seem like it evolves, and I wonder if there's
No,
a way to-
it doesn't cohere. It never coheres.
Mm.
It always its nature is to dissipate. The nature of reality is to be continually dissipating. Not
So
to.
it's always just to see these little
Yeah.
sparks of
Sure,
light.
that's all there is. That's all there is. Because it's not that it comes together into coherence or into persistence or into. I mean, that can seem to happen, but even when that happens, it's actually not made of that. It's actually made of these little flashes.
Mhm.
I mean, the fantasy of some achievement or some coherence or some stability or some persistence is the torturer.
Yeah.
That's hell. That's the devil's. That's the target. The devil's hanging on a string in front of you to keep you in torment. The fantasy of some resolution or some achievement, whereas the actuality of just absolute looseness and spontaneity and dissipation. It's a dissipation, but it's not a loss of anything. It's a dissipation in continual fullness, in continual grandeur, and continual opulence. Why don't we take a 5 or 10 minute break and do some jumping jacks, run around the block, pick a fight with somebody, have a martini.
Where are they?
Or go back to our singing.
Yeah.
Yeah, sing a silly song.
Who wants to wrestle?
A silly song of 6
All right.
He's actually remembering it wrong. Alan has got a whole chapter to read, and he's telling Hobbes, I got this whole chapter to read. And Hobbes says, well, what are you gonna do? He goes, well, I'm gonna break it down to its simplest element. He goes, you're gonna start with the first paragraph? He goes, no, I'm gonna ask, do I really care?
Yeah. Okay. All right. Hang on. By my feet. Yeah. I hope it's 2 feet. I'm so confused, so blood rushed to my head. That happened to me a lot, so you are not the only one. All the blood heading to my head.
Well, I'm glad you can join us. Oh, so you're off for tomorrow, right? You're not-
I'm here. Okay.
Wow.
Break this habit and it's like
Jumping jacks
it's
are
great.
We're lie down.
The opposite.
The opposite, right? All good, right?
See, it worked.
And then you land on one that,
The magic one.
the magic one that's specific for you, and then the magic one that's specific for you. You know what I mean? But, and I feel that we probably all have glimpses. We've all, but it's hard to, continue this.
Oh, nothing. There's no way I can get my glimpses back. There's always having something that's different.
Well, because it's always changing.
It's always changing. That's what's fun.
Oh, and what fruit is this tree?
This one, this is,
Asian pear?
no.
Oh my God, really, the warehouses?
What is it? Yeah, persimmon.
It's gotta be
What is it?
incredible.
Persimmon.
Persimmon.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, they're big. Yeah.
It's because she gives it miracle.
Say again?
No, I
Yeah, she's
haven't.
she's got the green thumb, the magical green
She's
thumb.
got two of them.
No, it's just the soil, probably.
The slows.
Oh my God, this, somebody.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a little Buddha. The sleeping poster. Jeff is over there.
He should have it. Peter should have one that he carries.
I know, I should.
Because I was.
It said Mel Brooks. Or Mel Brooks. That would be appropriate. That would give a change.
Never give a saga and even break. Mel Brooks.
Mel Brooks.
Ever give a what?
Saga. S-A-G-A.
So we'll change it to never give a sangha an even break?
You could do that too.
Groucho Marx said, last night I shot an elephant in my pajamas. How he got in my pajamas, I'll never know.
Yeah, we said
And then he went in that room to rest. Oh, somebody just went out there.
I was keeping it in there.
Oh, that's what you call it. I wish I could do that.
That would not be politically correct. No, always these days, we don't go around shooting.
And it's
I
like,
could
oh
never
yeah,
do
that
that.
was a great meditation.
I could never do that.
Never do that. I was always
Roll off, right?
I probably should have geared my knees, my hips. That's pretty political.
You could have fallen asleep.
No,
wait, you weren't bothering me 5 minutes ago.
Now all of a sudden you're like talking really loudly. Shut up. Now there'd be times when all of a sudden everything would let someone else just be there. Running a dialogue about something. Nice story going on, and all of a sudden, say, oh, that's right, Pete, stop. And all of a sudden my hip would hurt, right? It's like all of a sudden, oh yeah, that's right. No wonder I was running a story up there. It's the only way to keep these guys shut up. You know why you need to hurt? Your hip to hurt? Write a story on your, it's very distracting. It works really well. That or get up and leave the room, go do something really fun.
So was this like Wednesday?
All kinds. I tried all kinds of meditation, and I was always very good at it, and then I realized, what a waste of
I
time.
thought my wife and I later.
My friends would always say to me,
I went on a retreat with Tubton Rinpoche,
Uh-huh.
and he was talking about when Buddhism came to Tibet, and they were trying to translate it into the Tibetan language.
and I would try to give up on
That it took a lot of contemplation to translate the word. This one, right?
No, it made
Buddha.
No, I think it actually, that's a good
Dharma.
conclusion I came to, but further I thought.
Because Dharma had
really
has so many meanings. But the word they ended up choosing, in the Tibetan word they ended up choosing for Dharma was the same word used for change. I thought that was very interesting. I'd never thought of change as being the primary meaning of Dharma, but it was very, but I liked it.
Well, the meaning of Dharma
if you can't find it here.
um,
And that's why I stopped going to
is the essence of Buddhism.
because I realized that people were going there to find, they wanted something.
You know,
They wanted peace, or they wanted quiet mind.
Buddhism exists to define Dharma.
And I thought, and I was just,
And it did by saying that Dharma is unresolvable, no Dharma is our self-nature. And Dharma is any condition, any actuality, which is actually unresolvable, empty. So the meaning of Dharma, Buddhism defines the meaning of Dharma to be emptiness. And culture calling it change. It doesn't matter what you call it. Yeah, because it's more a matter of context.
But the word change is kind of has an implicit in it, something not grabbable.
I prayed and I prayed and I prayed and I waited and I waited and I waited. He didn't answer me. So I figured either he's not there or he likes me just the way I am. Then it's for real.
My takeaway, if you can call it that, is we always talk about the wow factor and go where it's easiest for you to find that, basically. And that's predicated on the fact that you have to find it, that you have to find it. And what I'm getting out of the day is that's actually like just like awe. It's actually the condition. Wow is a condition, because not knowing is the truth. So if you're being like a honeybee and going out and grabbing it, it's really predicated on things. Well, I know something and I have to.
The practice of spiritual, the yoga is very paradoxical, because in a way it's like going over a hill. For the first part of it, you're going one direction uphill, and then for the second part, you're going downhill, the opposite direction. So,
especially the ones who are really good.
The first part of yoga is a kind of a discrimination. It's sensitivity. It's becoming sensitive to. It's basically training yourself and getting outside of your frame of reference. And the second part of yoga consists of incorporation, of discovering that your frame of reference, you don't need to be outside it, but that's only meaningful by the actuality of what you have discovered outside it. Because if you just try to start point, you wouldn't appreciate what the frame of reference really was, because you'd just be looking at it from within the frame of reference. But if you get outside the frame of reference and then look at the frame of reference, then you can understand what the frame of reference is without needing to get outside it, which is, of course, the end of yoga. The end of yoga is discovering that it's all wow. But you have to discover what wow is in order to appreciate that. But at first it looks like you're going away, and then it looks like you're becoming specialized, and then you relax that specialization, become more general, and incorporate everything.
Yeah.
So it's like first a discrimination and then incorporation. So it's very paradoxical. So good spiritual advice can be completely opposite for people in different points of their process.
Tendencies for decades.
And that whole thing happens too. That whole cycle.
At the same time,
That whole cycle, the whole arc seems to be it's on its own. It's on its own time. It's on its own.
It's unique. It's absolutely individual. Every aspect of it is completely individual. There's no, the sort of, you could say the archetype of it is what it is, but the way it shows up in anyone's actual experience is always unique. That's why assembly-line approaches to spirituality are stupidly simplistic, because you have to work with actual people where they actually are. And you can't just assume, you can't just, just assume, just take everyone and assume they're doing it. Okay, you start here and you're gonna do this for a year, then you're gonna do that or whatever. It's stupidly mechanistic. Because different people are everyone's in a different place, everyone has different capacities, everyone has a different process, everyone has different efficiencies and so on and so forth.
Yeah. It reminds me of a friend of mine who went on a retreat with one of Trump's retreats, like a Shambhala weekend. And like within 3 hours, he's like, this is blasted. And they say, no, you're not supposed to experience it right now. It's like, what? No, that's not what we're concentrating on.
That's next year's program.
That's the
But you can't know. I mean, you can't know a beginner's a beginner just because they're a beginner. They might be very advanced yogi intrinsically. Or another person that's been doing it for all their life might be a total clod.
Yeah, the way I'm opening it from the outside, I don't recall not being able to lock it. So, I don't know. Feeling nuts.
Yeah, it sounds like.
Oh my God, I want something great. So, kindergarten. Yeah, you should be glad you missed that. That was a pretty bad experience.
Oh, hey. I'm supposed to do an encore.
No, she didn't do
Joshua Tree retreat.
I think so.
Great. I held off on.
You still have my contact stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wasn't going to do it. Because right off the very first email I got, it said that we're not going to be a single occupancy.
Right.
It's the only way I can do it. And then
No, we've never stopped.
a month ago, a couple months ago, sending an email that says we have them.
So
I did the whole thing. I don't have to stop.
Well, I'm sure I would have been excommunicated.
Yeah.
Are we back?
I look at that too, because I'm just
Maybe, some are. We don't know.
I'm gonna bring my new camera.
Indeterminate.
Let's see how many people. 5
So,
people
This is the
online.
figure of speech.
Welcome back. If you went anywhere. If you're back. There's one you've all probably heard the expression real world considerations. Like, for example, the plane is due to take off at 11:45, but in the real world it takes off when it does, at maybe 11:50, maybe at 12:30, maybe not at all.
Yeah.
And so there's this sort of the planned version, the intended version, and there's real world considerations is what actually happens, which always deviates from the planned version. In a very profound sense, this is all about ultimate real world consideration. What's really going on here? And all versions of normal human modes of approaching this are a sort of a planned version, a theoretical version. Well, it's supposed to work out like this. The schedule is this, but then real world is always, well, what's it really? What is really happening here? And that is a very common usage aspect of what this is. This is all about getting real. What's real? What's really here? And it's just really this. It's what it has always been. Which is neither here nor there.
Don't, not quite sure how to ask this, but okay, so this is it. This is realization right here, right now.
This is it.
Your experience is different, has a higher degree of clarity, if you will, okay, that you're trying to communicate.
Does it?
So, well, what I'm wondering is if you say there was, again, words, the before and the after, like before you had an awakening or whatever word you want to use it, and after, what was different for you? What did you notice? Or did you notice? I'm saying I'm having difficulty putting it into words.
I noticed that this is the way it is. This never will be the way I thought it was. And of course, as we've been talking about today from many aspects, what causes all the problems is what we think of it as being, not what it is. Unresolvability is not a problem at all. It's just a fact. you know, what causes the problem is a fantasy of resolvability. I mean, we talked about real world considerations. For example, on the plane we came down here on everyone got on the plane and it was supposed to take off at quarter over. It finally took off at half past the next hour. So for 40 minutes we just sat there. And the woman sitting next to me was sort of fuming. Why are we sitting here? Because she was thinking there was a problem because it was supposed to be 11:45. But there's no suppose. It's supposed to do what it does, which of course it did. And in that context, there's no problem at all. Cool, it takes off when it takes off, if at all. You know, and it gets here when it gets here, if at all. You know, and maybe it crashes. Maybe, you know, maybe it doesn't take off. Maybe, who knows? No, you never know. And that's just the real world. And the real world's okay. The real world is not a problem. It's only our ideas of things, and when that diverges from actuality, there's a problem. So the more thoroughly you understand how actuality is, and the more thoroughly you understand that your models of it are wrong, period, blanket across the board, the less problems you'll have, because the problems come from that divergence. And of course, reality is always right. Your models are, the fact that your models don't agree with reality is not the fault of reality, ever. And so that's really all this is about, is just seeing how is this really? Well, it's real, it's actual, it's always here. It never is more here or less here. It always looks different. It never looks like anything with any stability whatsoever. You can never even tell what it looks like. You can never tell what anything is. But that's not an issue, because what it is not diminished by the fact that it's unresolvable, and it wouldn't be improved by the fact if it was resolvable, which it isn't. And even that it is unresolvable is unresolvable. So I mean, the whole thing is just very peculiar. But that is the case is not a problem. And so therefore, if you don't expect it to be other than that, you will be free of problems, utterly and completely.
Mm-hmm. You talk about the woman who has only a rock in her hut or whatever, and then someone tells her, well, it's made of gold, you're rich, you know. Yet sometimes I wander around this dirty house, and normally there's a problem about it, but there are times when I just go, there's no problem. This is kind of fascinating, just plain looking at some toothbrush lying there or whatever, just
a lot of interesting stuff.
Which is a good argument not to clean my house. It is not such a good argument, but anyway. But I mean, what you're saying, just to the point of because there's some subtle or gross judgment about it should be otherwise, needs to be different. This isn't good enough. It could be better. Blah 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 blah. It's just ruining, what is.
That's the essence. That's what samsara is. Samsara is a fantasy that things should be other than they are.
Yeah.
And nirvana is the cessation of that samsara.
Yeah.
Yeah, samsara sounds like it's a matter of futility.
It is. Samsara is futile. It's absurd. It's suffering caused by suffering.
You were talking to Stan before we reconvened.
Yeah.
About 2 stages of yoga.
Yes.
And I'm curious about, I caught some of that.
Yeah. You want me to
Yeah,
elaborate a bit? Yeah. Well, I mean, we were discussing how at various stages of spiritual exploration, it seems like you do completely opposite things, and this is true. The overall path of yoga is a lot like going up a hill and then going down the hill. So for the first half, you're moving upwards, and for the second half, you move in the opposite direction, downwards. And it can look like that because as a beginner in spirituality, most of the emphasis is on discrimination, separating, getting out, exploring outside of your normalcy, exploring outside of the normal frame of reference to try and discover a greater variety, greater richness of what's actually here. And then the second half, on the contrary, you let go of that moving away from it, and you relax with it, incorporate it, include it, and discover the way in which the normal frame of reference is actually made up of and exists within the context of what you found when you went outside it. So, the first half is more discrimination, just drawing distinctions, and the second half is more inclusiveness of relaxing distinctions and including everything. So they can seem to be very opposite orientations. And again, it's not necessarily discrete where it's all this and all that for the first half. For the second half, it's kind of arbitrary to say that. But there is a degree where there's a degree to which that's the case.
Right. So like in the first phase, you're discriminating, you're thinking about something or wanting it to be different from the fact.
No, it's not a matter of different from the fact. You're discovering the way in which you're just by exploring your experience directly, you're discovering ways in which your experience is different than you're used to thinking of it as being. So you're getting outside of your normal interpretive framework through exploring ways in which you are outside your normal interpretive framework, but the normal interpretive framework is like a self-hypnosis. So it's like a censorship mechanism. So in a normal interpretive framework, typically we hypnotize ourselves to not even notice any perceptions that are outside the normalcy. It's not that they're not being experienced, they're not being acknowledged and appreciated. So in the first stage, the emphasis is more on noticing ways in which one's experience is different than and outside of the way one is ordinarily interpreting it as being. And in the second stage, so to speak, one uses what one has discovered through that exploration. One uses these relatively non-linear perspectives that one discovers, these irrational perspectives and undescribable textual aspects of experience, and look back on normalcy and discover that that's the same thing. So you discover, you could say you discover subtlety, and then you look at unsubtlety and discover that it's actually subtlety too.
Or sacred.
Yes, sacred. No other ways to put it. I mean, there's no accurate language. None of this is true. Nothing. I haven't said a true statement today. Okay, I haven't said anything that's true. It's not like that. But all of these ways of talking are hopefully useful or valuable to some degree in terms of sort of priming the pump of looking at your experience in useful ways. But it's not like I'm describing it and that's the gospel and it's just exactly like he said and he used these words, so it must be that. It's the absolute utter opposite of literalism.
Sort of lenses to look through.
Yeah. Yeah, they're funny hats to try on.
Sort of like portals to look through.
Yeah, sure.
To look through your habitual.
Yeah, but the important thing is.
Thinking.
Yeah, but the important thing is what you might see through the portal, not the portal itself.
Right.
So, I mean, a lot of the things I say are very specifically untrue and very specifically inaccurate and sort of manipulative. But hopefully, again, they are beneficial or useful as sort of provocative instruments to provoke that some kind of seeing or intuiting or what have you.
I feel like you're throwing out tools for us to use.
Yeah, tossing out tools, tossing out traps, tossing out seductions. It's a multimedia befuddlement.
But I feel like probably all of us have seen through that, habitual thinking or habitual
pattern of
Well, I can't
looking
imagine.
at things.
Of course, I can't imagine why you wouldn't have it, or why would you be
Why
here?
would we be here? Yeah,
You must have some sense that there's something going on here,
yeah.
and being able to engage with it to whatever degree you are. And this stuff is all completely individual. There are no groups. You know, everyone is a one-off. Everyone is with it their way, in their process, to their degree, at their speed. And it's absolutely true, absolutely unique, absolutely individualized. So there's no commonality at all, and there's no need for there to be. And the tools one person uses may be completely and utterly different than the tools another person uses, or stumbles on as useful. You know the progress or achievement or real or intuition, you know, is always surprising. It's always by surprise. It's never expected. It's never by planning.
Yeah. Well, we were talking the other day about this stuff, and you know, it brought to mind what Joseph Campbell said one time. He said, "Follow your bliss," and it seems like if you follow your bliss or follow that which you feel like following at any given moment, is, you know, I don't know, more conducive to breaking through the,
Sure, that's a good
habit.
That's a good way to navigate. There's lots of ways to navigate, and that's a good rough formula. You can seek bliss, you can seek wow factor, you can avoid pain, you can try and find more excitement, you can try and find more vitality. I mean, there's a lot of different sort of ways, but basically you sort of have some kind of a North Star that you use as a way of, so when you're in any context or with any information, you kind of hold it up against that North Star and see if it's working with it or against it. And then hopefully you'll have the wit to stay with your North Star and not get seduced into something because it's popular or product of good salesmanship.
Another thing that comes to mind is gratitude. Just having gratitude for whatever shows up.
Sure. I mean, that can be another kind of a trick. Keep you open.
The less suffering, you know, that the path of least resistance, I guess you would say, but you know, just whatever causes the least suffering.
Sure. But again, it can be tricky because if you strictly follow the least suffering as a guideline, you're liable to get yourself in little loops.
That's true.
Because sometimes a more productive way out can seem like more short-term suffering, even if it results in perhaps unexpected or surprising long-term freedom from suffering.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, genuine spirituality is always provocative. It's always a little disruptive. It always pushes you a little out of your comfort zone. Yeah. And if it's too smooth or too comfortable, watch out.
Yeah.
It should be a little threatening. It should be a little intimidating.
I think that's kind of what you know, drop kicked me into this path anyways, the suffering of the intense suffering.
Sure. Well, that's very common, of course. But as one progresses, spirituality gets easier and easier and easier because it consists more and more of just letting be what is, letting be what is be. It consists more and more of just, okay, cool, whatever. So it's, you know, it's looser and looser, easier and easier, less and less effort, less and less anything until it's nothing at all.
Yeah.
You know, and achievement, realization looks like nothing at all. It's like, whatever.
Yeah. You know, resistance to what is just causing just all that much more suffering.
Exactly. And unfortunately, when we have resistance, we often don't know we have resistance. It's subliminal.
I learned that about physical pain. You
Oh, yeah.
Physical
pain is a perfect example.
Yeah.
If you don't resist it, it's actually, the pain may be there, but it's not suffering anymore.
No, it's totally different.
Yeah. But in keeping with this weekend's theme, I want to reiterate again, it's just ultimately and absolutely and radically simple. Just this actuality is the whole shooting match. There's no more elaboration, there's no more description or explanation or process or anything needed. Just this that is here. Inclusive, just exactly as it is. And all this elaboration, everything we've been talking about today, just follows on that, and it's plain to see. It's completely obvious. So, you know, the entirety of spirituality is just this absolute utter simplicity of this basic fact. The only fact is the only fact there is. There's only one fact, and that fact is this actuality. No other fact.
So this actuality is experience. It's not my experience. It doesn't matter anything else that's going on. It's just the realm of experience.
I mean, you can throw all sorts of words. You can throw any words at it you want, but it is this. It is this that is here. This that is actual. What's actual is what's actual, and what's actual is exactly that. Exactly what's actual. And you can say, well, is experience actual? Well, sure as hell is. You know, is what seems to be showing up as the qualities in experience actual? If you want to differentiate that from experience for some reason, well, sure, you can do that. So it's like a pie. It's like someone serves you a pie sitting there. It's like, how many pieces can I slice this pie into? As many as you want. You want to slice it into, well, is it experience, and is it the world, and is it beings, and is it consciousness, and is it psychology, and is it my personality, and is it senses of identification, and is it the analysis of the mind, and is it this, that, and the other? Sure. That's just taking the pie and slicing it in lots of little pieces and pretending the pieces are different from each other. But it's still a pie, and this is the pie. This is this simple actuality that is here is inclusive. There's nothing that's not this. It's not like there's this and then there's all the other stuff. There's no other stuff. Any other stuff you would find is actually this. You know, the house is this. The cars drive, noise of the sirens in the street is this. The breeze and the coming through the windows is this. The light cleaning off the leaves outside is this. The sense of gravity is this. The feelings in your body is this. You know, your metabolism that you're sensing is. I mean, obviously, you can slice and dice it all you want in terms of qualifying it in terms of a bunch of different sub aspects. But when you're looking for those aspects, you know, as we've been talking about today, they aren't actually discrete from each other. They're argued into existence. They're claims, but they really ultimately never depart from this. They never depart from the whole. This that is here is not something that's made of parts. It's not something that has components that somehow, it's not the sum of a bunch of parts. It is exactly what it is. It presents as infinite differentiation. It presents as literally infinite information. I mean, you know, obviously. But that information doesn't resolve into discrete, stable, findable parts. Okay. again, the whole fallacy of human normalcy is the pretense that all of this analysis generates actual separate subsystems. And that's just inaccurate. It's just not like that. Yeah.
In Dzogchen practice, there is a pit instruction that say, pat.
Mm-hmm.
When at the moment when you broadly say that loudly, and then it's just this without any basically the mind stream is being cut off. You see the natural state.
Right.
To me, when I go to my car every time, slap, close the door. So that is the bedrock of the ground of everything. It's basically the natural state.
This actuality is the natural state. All those wonderful tricks in Dzogchen, that in particular uses the principle of startlement. When the mind is startled, it suspends the interpretive framework is shattered for an instant, and yet of course this actuality is not shattered. It doesn't go anywhere. And so in that moment of startlement, which you can recreate again and again and again, and it's mechanistically, it doesn't even need to be a surprise. It's mechanistic that a loud noise will just, it suspends the analytical framework. And so this actuality that's here becomes very clearly apparent. And so this particular trick that Helen's talking about in Dzogchen takes advantage of that principle of startlement. But again, what this is never goes anywhere, and it's always here. And the more you become aware of it, you don't need to rely on those kinds of tricks, of course. But anything like that can be useful.
There's another thing that happens every day. When I'm standing in front of the mirror, just the entirety, just to feel like the whole thing. You can't separate anything, but just the whole.
Yeah.
And the sensation is completely drops. The body sensation is just relaxed to the ground, just wow.
Sure.
So that's another way for me to explore or to experience.
Yeah. There's lots of tricks and there's lots of ways of being with this, but they all are this itself, and they're all available here. And so, of course, the point of that in practice is familiarize yourself, and the more familiar you become with it, the more easy it is for you to see it without having to use these tricks.
Right.
And then here it is. This is it. This is the. This is
but but for us, it's kind of we indulge in the thinking all the time.
Oh, sure.
So when the teacher pointed out, it's very hard for someone to really see it.
Yeah.
But using those tricks, then you immediately experience it.
Sure.
And then after a while, you became more familiar of what was being pointing at. So it's kind of helpful.
Sure. Want to try that? You guys want to try that?
Yeah.
Do this experiment?
Yeah.
Okay. So just watch your experience closely. Okay. Hey! 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 You notice how there's a kind of a hiccup where it sort of it just releases as being anything, and then it sort of recongeals like that. It's like almost like water being forced out and then coming back in or something. See that? You feel it. It's very palpable. I mean, it's mechanical. It's not even it's just a simple. It's taking advantage of a mechanism of startlement. The mind physiologically or whatever has this mechanism where there's a startlement, it goes into a neutral mode, I guess, to free itself up for spontaneity in case it's a threatening, life-threatening situation that would demand some kind of spontaneous response. Hey! Is this a moment? Hey! So this is just one trick that Helen was talking about in Dzogchen. You can do it yourself. I mean, you can act when you do that yourself, even though you know when you're going to scream and it's not a surprise. Still, in that moment afterwards, it's just you'll experience this phenomenon.
How do you spell that syllable? P-E-H?
Well, it's in Tibetan.
Oh,
In Tibetan, it's an actual letter.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually transliterated P-H-A-T.
P-H-A-T.
It's usually pronounced like pate. It's not important that it be that sound. That it be any abrupt, loud sound, sufficiently loud to be startling to the system. It's basically physiological.
Mm-hmm. And the mind stream is being broadly cut off. What I learned is it is, even though it is so simple, what was being pointed out is so simple, and it's even laughable because we see it all the time, all day long, but we just couldn't recognize it. But with certain trick, and it shows you this is,
Well, it's so simple. I mean, this that is here is completely obvious. You can call it whatever you want to it. The presence of your experiential field, or the presence of reality, or the presence of being, or whatever. All of these abstractions, but it's not an abstraction. It's a very concrete thing. It's this that is here, which of course, in which everything is, and to the extent there isn't everything, and so on and so forth. All of this is very obvious and simple. In fact. We make it complicated by overthinking it.
See, I was attending I was exploring Tibetan teaching, and I encountered with a lot of people, and most of them are very loyal, and they've been in this path like 20, 30, even 40 years, and they spend thousands of dollars, go to India and Tibet, go to Bhutan, or so many different countries, and they spend thousands of dollars in the retreat. And they're still very heartfelt to supporting it. But when I talk to them, and they say, we are still doing the Nandro, we're in preparation stage, we're still accumulating or purification for so many years, and but this is so simple and laughably simple, but they just completely ignore it and just do the accumulation or whatever they keep doing it for 30, 40 years.
Buddhism,
and I just feel like
Buddhism itself can become such a mechanism for delusion.
Yeah, I was so surprised to each one of them I talking to, and they're still holding on to this so-called practice or lower practice or whatever it is.
Because they aren't interested in the result; they're interested in the practice. They don't want to be Buddha; they want to be Buddhists. It's oriented towards defining themselves as Buddhists, not finding out what they actually are.
Yeah, they were.
It has nothing to do with Buddhism or not.
Yeah, they were so proud to
proud. Proud is egoism
in everything.
It's just it's more self-definition. The problem is self-definition, not a solution.
Yeah.
And so much of that practice in being involved in that in a big monolithic organization like that is one of sort of it's status, it's subliminal arrogance. They feel, I'm on the path, I'm really working here, I'm accumulating merit on this, so they're very proud of themselves, even if they're busy being compassionate and humble and all this. They're proud that they're being compassionate and humble, so it's very paradoxical.
But the teacher was teaching this big instruction and see who you are, what you are, whatever, and they completely disregard that part and they focus on.
Isn't that funny?
It was sad.
But they say that in Dzogchen. Dzogchen is for a very small percentage of people. because most people are not capable. They don't have enough sensitivity or whatever capacity to see what it's really about, see how simple it is. I don't know if that's true, but that's what they say. It seems to be the case. I mean, I talk about this stuff, and very few people seem to. I mean, how many people are in the LA basin? How many people are here today? So what's up with that? I mean, Helen House is small, so it's
Very exclusive.
trying to get 4 million people in here would be a bit of a squeeze.
No, we just didn't invite the rest of them. We're very exclusive here in LA.
So at my work, the restroom, men's restroom, the mechanics have not fixed this door that slams harder and harder every week. And everyone comes through and they just open the door and then bam, and they go like that, right? And so I get used to it. I hear them coming in, right? So maybe I should just experience it. Huh?
It's
Don't define it as a problem.
Yeah. Okay.
Let it wake you up.
Yeah, I definitely had it as a problem.
Let it be a joy.
Opportunity.
My mind is saying that awareness is outside of this.
Mine can say anything it wants.
I know. Awareness is not an experience.
Find awareness. Does awareness have location?
No.
Can you even find awareness? What would you look for if you look for awareness?
Who's looking though? I mean.
Whatever. I mean, you could say there is awareness. There is a functioning of what we call awareness. There is an awareing. But does that mean it has to be a thing? Maybe it's just a miraculous apparition. Maybe there's no such thing as awareness. There's just the condition of awareness. And this is that condition. I don't know. It's not like these things have labels on them. The world doesn't have a label saying world, and the consciousness doesn't have a label saying consciousness. It's just we tell it it's that. It's not telling us it's that. So this is let it show you what it is. Stop telling it what it is, and then you'll see where it is.
Well, I've been owning it.
I got news for you. It owns you.
I find that as I begin to get what it is that you're teaching, it's as if there's more of a sense of constant motion, as opposed to static.
Oh yeah.
And that seems to be just, and to see. You don't need necessarily to, quote, think about things like we do here. If you can just get into that underlying motion sense, I don't know how to put it.
Absolutely.
That's
it.
Things begin to unravel. If you will.
Totally. That's it. I mean, that's the totality of the yoga. It's just be with this ever-present motion. That there's nothing that is not this motion, and this motion is everything. And it's not like there's motion and there's something that's moving. The motion is what's moving, and the whole thing is just this amazing vitality that's completely unstatic and dynamic in every aspect, everywhere. It's, it's the life current. It's the flow of reality, you could call it. And just be with that. You are it. It's right here. Check it out. Tune into it. And you notice that that's all you need to tune into, because everything is that. So when you tune into that, you're tuning into everything, because everything comes with. There's only one motion, and all motion is that motion. All motion is that dynamism, that vitality, that. I mean, the very, very best way to be with this is just feel it. Feel your experience. Feel your experience. Don't try to make sense of it. Don't analyze it, even as motion or not, as this and that. Just feel it, and that is total engagement with it. Experience is felt. You know, we have these abstractions that imply that there's something else going on. We could say, "I see light." See light, it just means light is being felt experientially. You know, hear sound, sound is being felt. I'm thinking thought, thought is being felt. The presence of thought energy, whatever that is being felt. And so experience is already being felt. The way it appears is through being felt. You can say being felt by consciousness, but that's all abstractions. And the fact is, it is already, just in its presence, and in the fact that it shows up at all, being very intimately engaged with. And so just feel that engagement. Feel what is already happening spontaneously. It's not like you're doing something extra. It's not like you have to churn out some feeling that isn't already there. Just notice that experience is already being felt, and feel what that feeling is like. When experience is being felt, what's being felt? Not as a question, verbal, just feel the texture of experience. Experience has a texture. It's very, very cool. It's very subtle. Just feeling that is worth reading every spiritual book that was ever printed. Just that one, just feeling that, it shows you everything. Like you say, you know, feeling the motion, the dynamism of experience. Experience is texture. All experience is texture. Color is texture. Thought is texture. Sound is texture. Experience is profoundly textural. You explore your experience like as if you're exploring it by some kind of a psychic braille. Just feel what it feels like. Feel the texture of your experience. Don't worry about any how you're doing it. Don't worry about what it is. Just feel it. It's like this inconceivable, amazing, multidimensional tapestry or symphony or something. It's a texture of you know, this sea of textures and densities and subtleties. You learn more by doing that than by, you know, studying everything you've ever said about this stuff.
One time I was in a museum and looking through the art, painting or sculpture. What happened was so interesting that it's beyond my expectation. I was standing in front of sculpture. It's very, very old, but without any thought. It just, a whole thing is like all the raw data is downloading. It's just so much of information, just and it's completely beyond any description.
Oh yeah.
So I don't really need to read the fine print. Just wow.
Well, yeah, art's like that. You know, you go to the museum and the pieces of art have these little plaques next to them. And the plaques are so stupid compared to the art. Look at the art and let it show you what it is. You don't need to have straight together, you know, 50 words and like, oh, now I know what this is, what I'm looking at. Like, are you kidding? Let the art show you what it is. Don't worry about what a bunch of words say. And this is all like that too. Experience is like that too. I feel like it's getting to be close to quitting time. How are you all feeling? I feel like it's been a very thorough day, and if we knock off, you get some. I guess most of you, I expect, or a lot of you, will be back tomorrow. So we'll dive right back into it. We've covered a lot of ground today, or actually we've covered no ground at all. We got back to the beginning. Got back to the beginning. Get back to basics. So anyway, have a lovely evening, and we'll resume tomorrow around 10.
Oh, super.
Great.
Very, very nice.
Reminds me of that T.S. Eliot line, "We shall not cease